seats of honor. Let's go back to Luke chapter 22 and just look briefly at Peter's place at the table, Luke chapter 22. Since there is no real, quote, servant in the room, Jesus assigns Peter to sit there in the servant's seat. Now, is Jesus trying to cut him down to size? No, he is not. He's not trying to bring him down a peg. But this is a teachable moment. He's going to give Peter a lesson in what is true honor. What is real honor? So, in Luke chapter 22, look at verse 24. Again, this verse that I read just a minute ago. And there was also a strife among them, which of them should be accounted the greatest. And he said unto them, let me just pause right there. You remember when the mother of James and John came to Jesus and made that request, Lord, grant that my two sons may sit in the kingdom where? At your right hand and your left hand. See, those were the places of honor. Place number 1, place number 3. Those are the places of honor. Of course, and she says, in your kingdom. But anyway, that gives us an idea that always those two seats, those are the places of honor. Verse 25. And he said unto them, the kings of the Gentiles exercise lordship over them. Lordship. And they that exercise authority upon them are called benefactors. But you shall not be so. But he that is greatest among you, let him be as the younger, and he that is chief, let him be he that doth serve. Jesus is saying the one who serves, that's the true seat of honor. Verse 27, for whether is greater he that sitteth at meat, or he that serveth, is not he that sitteth at meat. You know, that's the natural conclusion. One who's seated at the head of the table, that's the power broker. But I am among you as he that serveth. Ye are they which have continued with me in my temptation. Now, what was the duty of the servant? Well, it was to bring in the food, but there was also another major duty of the servant, and that was to do what? Wash the feet of the guests. That was to be done immediately when the guests assembled. They would have their feet washed by the servant. Has Peter washed feet? No, he has not. This is no doubt a tough lesson for Peter, who is impulsive, who always speaks and acts first. And as the servant, he should have been ready to wash the feet. So he does not. So what does Jesus do? Takes the towel and proceeds to wash the feet of the guest, showing again to Peter that the servant is truly the one who is to be honored. So I'll leave it at that, and when we come back in the next, of course, I am not going to be here next weekend, but Mark is going to be sharing with you next Sunday morning, so I know you're going to enjoy that. Mark always has a good word. But when we come back in 2 weeks, hopefully we will look at the Last Supper, some more details about the Last Supper. And in 2 weeks from today will be Resurrection Day. Yes. All right, let's go back now to Judges, and let's check in on Samson and see if he's made any progress. By the way, that arrangement, that table, that Passover table, that arrangement is called a triclinium. That won't be on the test, so don't worry about it. Again, maybe it will. All right, and you have your outline here. I thought I would try to just rush on through and complete Samson today, but I don't think I will. I But we're going to see how that came to be. We won't today. We're just going to get a little glimpse of that today. But in 2 weeks, we will come back and begin to wrap up Samson. If you will look on your outline at the first paragraph that I gave you there, I think that's just a good little summary right there. God used Samson to destroy the Philistines in part. Now, what was Samson called to do even before he was born? What did the angel of the Lord, Jesus, the Old Testament appearance of Jesus, what did he say to Samson's mother? That he would be the deliverer. He would be a judge. He would be the deliverer. And he would begin to deliver Israel from the Philistines. Well, up to what we've seen thus far, Samson doesn't seem interested in destroying the Philistines. He seems more intrigued with playing with the Philistines. It's kind of like a cat, and we've seen our cat do this on the patio, go out in the yard and catch a mouse, bring it up on the patio, and watch the cat slap at the mouse to just let it run as far as it can, and then the cat runs to it and picks it up and brings it back and continues. Yeah, it kind of makes me shiver too, Renee. She shivered. That's kind of the way Samson did with the Philistines. It was like trifling with them, playing with them, teasing them. But you know what? You can't trifle with the devil. You can't tease the devil, because you know what? You're going to get caught in the snare for sure. So, back again to the paragraph. God used Samson to destroy the Philistines in part, but because of Samson's incomplete obedience, even a partial victory came at great personal expense to Samson. If Samson had been obedient, God would have accomplished his plan in a way that would have blessed Samson. Samson is an example of God's great and amazing grace. I know we think of dispensations like the dispensation of law, and then we have the innocents, of course, in the garden, the dispensation of law, and then we have the dispensation of grace. And we want to confine the grace of Jesus to the new covenant of these 2,000 years that we've been under grace, praise the Lord. But do you know God still was having grace even during the time of the law? Even under the law, there was grace. And this is so evident in Samson, because we see Samson messing up time and time again and being so blatant in his disregard of God's laws and of his Nazirite vow. And if we were God, what would we do? We'd want to be like James and John and call down fire from heaven and just get him out of my face. But yet God has such grace. Do you reckon God ever, if we were God, we would ever say about ourselves, I'm just going to send down fire from heaven or lightning and get them out of my face? They keep messing up. Oh, don't you thank God for grace? Grace, grace, God's grace. In Judges chapter 14, just a quick review of that, and then we're going to move on into 15. Samson married the Philistine woman, which of course was contrary to God's law. So that means he enters into a covenant with the Philistines. Now, what's the name of the town where this Philistine woman lived? Timnath, yes. So he enters into a covenant with the Philistines of Timnath. And you see, he's not only entering a covenant with this woman, and his father said, is there not one, when Samson said, I have seen a woman, get her for me. And of course, talking about this Philistine woman. And you remember what his father said? Is there not one of the young women of the among Israel that suits your taste? Right, that's good. Thank you, Steve. Verse 3. Then his father and his mother said unto him, is there never a woman among the daughters of thy brethren or among all thy people that you would go and take a wife of the uncircumcised Philistines? Uncircumcised, that means they're not a covenant people. Samson was determined.
So by his marriage with this Philistine woman, he not only now enters into a covenant, because you see, marriage is a covenant. It is a covenant. And not only is he in covenant now with this woman, but he's in covenant with her people. Young people, let me tell you, I've heard Daryl tell this many times. He said when he and his siblings began to get older and they began to date, his mother constantly hammered into them, if you get serious about a girl, speaking mainly to the boys, I think, look at her family, because you're marrying the family too. So young people, when you find the one that you think is right for you, look at that family, because you are entering a covenant with that family. You're marrying them too. I'm going to tell you, you're going to have in-laws. You better like your in-laws, because you got them. And I thank God for my in-laws. God bless me, and bless me with a wonderful mother-in-law. So you think about that, young people. Be careful. And I won't ask for any testimonials in here. Samson, of course, at this feast, now they have the wedding feast, and he has the 30 young Philistine men who are like the groomsmen, his companions. They come and join the feast. This is a 7-day drinking binge is what it is, because when you look up that word feast, the root word means to drink or to be drunken. So this was just a drunken fest for 7 days. Again, that breaks Samson's Nazirite vow. So after the riddle business, and we won't even talk about that. We've already talked about the riddle. You know what the riddle is. After all that riddle business, and when Samson says to the 30 companions, what's that famous statement? If you had not plowed with my heifer, you would not have known the answer to my riddle. And so it so angers Samson that he goes down to Ashkelon, which is 25 miles away. Now, why did he go down to Ashkelon, 25 miles away, to kill those Philistines, to get their clothes to take back? Because now he's got to, the jig's up. He's got to pay, because they figured out the riddle. They had a little bet going there, you see. Samson lost because his wife nagged him till she got the answer, and then she told. So he goes to Ashkelon. He's got to go down there because, you see, he's in covenant now with these Philistines of Timnath. And that includes the, quote, rights of hospitality. So he can't, in other words, these are his in-laws. He can't touch them. So he's going to go down there to Ashkelon, to another city, and there he's going to do his destruction. Now, we come on to verse 20. If you look at the verse 20 of chapter 14. But Samson's wife was given to his companion, whom he had used as his friend. In other words, one of his groomsmen. This, you see, the marriage, and I've told you about this, how this ritual of the Philistine marriage had a built-in trial period. That might be a good thing, but that might be a bad thing. It had a trial period. So the bride would stay at her father's house for several months, and the groom, her husband, would come down periodically. He'd bring a sacrifice. He'd bring something to pay her room and board. And so they had that period of time there, and if it didn't work out, or if they were dissatisfied with one another after a few months, that could be very dangerous. You all remember the first months you were married? But again, we won't have any testimonials. They had the opportunity, see, to back out. Now, Samson never said, I don't want that woman. He never said that. But because he went off in a huff and he was so angry at her, you see, for telling the riddle to his enemies, actually, and he went down there and killed all those Philistines. Now, evidently, as one commentator has said, he steamed for 6 months about this till he finally cooled off. So evidently he hadn't seen her in 6 months. But anyway, during that time, the girl's father said, evidently Samson has rejected you, so I'll just give you to his Philistine companion. So that's what happened. But again, this is a scheming father-in-law, as we're going to see. So now, Samson's decided, he's cooled off, and he's, chapter 15, now he's going to go down, he's going to reconcile with his wife. So let's look at chapter 15, verse 1. But it came to pass within a while after, in the time of wheat harvest, so we can tell there's some time has lapsed, that Samson visited his wife with a kid, is with a goat. And he's bringing that probably to pay for her room and board, and two, it could have just been like an offering, to make up, for he's not been to see her. And he said, I will go into my wife into the chamber. But her father would not suffer him to go in. And her father said, I verily thought that you had utterly hated her. I thought you hated her. That's very dangerous when we assume. In other words, he's saying, I assumed that you had rejected her. Do you remember another time when someone assumed something in Scripture? Back over in Exodus, it was Moses. When Moses slew the Egyptian, and he said, and over in Acts where I think maybe this is in Stephen's sermon, and he refers to that incident where Moses slew the Egyptian, and then, after Moses slew the Egyptian, then he had to flee because now there was a price on his head, and the Pharaoh's, he's out to get Moses now, so that's when Moses goes to the backside of the desert. But Stephen says he thought that the Israelites knew he had been called to be the deliverer. He assumed they knew. See, Moses was feeling this. He knew he was called to be the deliverer, but you see, he jumped the gun. He jumped in there he acted too quickly because he assumed that the Israelites would not, they knew he was to be called the deliverer, but it didn't work that way. It's a dangerous thing to assume something. So the father says, I verily thought, or I assumed that you had hated her. Therefore I gave her to thy companion. Is not her younger sister fairer than she? Take her, I pray thee, instead of her. Now, this is a scheming father-in-law, because now what has Samson's father, or his parents, what have they done when they went down to make arrangements for this wedding? Pay the dowry, pay the bride price, yes. So now that one's given away. So this father-in-law, you see, he's got dollar signs in his eyes. He sees another bride price coming into focus. So he is like, here, take her younger sister. She's prettier anyway, and she's younger too. Well, of course, that would bring another bride price, wouldn't it? Yes. Now, I ask you a question on your outline. Can you recall another father-in-law who pulled a fast one on the unsuspecting son-in-law? Jacob, that's right. Jacob and Laban. Laban was his father-in-law, yes. Now, this again so angers Samson. Now, remember what we've said about Samson? He was a man of the flesh. His flesh dominated him. He had these knee-jerk reactions. He was done wrong. That knee-jerk reaction is, I'm going to do you wrong. I'm going to pay you back. I'm going to get revenge. That's how Samson he lived according to his flesh. His flesh dominated him. Now, let's go on. I'm going to have to make this quick. Verse 3. And Samson said concerning them, now shall I be more blameless than the Philistines, though I do them a displeasure. Now, what he means there, now they can't blame me when I react. Now they can't blame me when I go in there and destroy the crops and kill some of these Philistines, because his father has broken the covenant. He's saying, you've broken the covenant that I had with her, with your daughter, and with these Philistines. So I'm not obligated to them anymore. So you can't blame me. So what does he do? Verse 4. And Samson went and caught 300 foxes. Now, that's a better translation there would be jackals. Now I'm going to ask my walking encyclopedia over here. Is a jackal, Daryl, the same thing as a coyote? Okay, but it's similar. Is it similar? A coyote. Do you all, what?
About half the size.
About half the size? Okay. See, I didn't do any research on that, but I just knew foxes is not the right translation for that. They run in packs. I did learn that. They run in packs just like, is it coyote or coyote? Okay. The cartoon says coyote. Yes, small. Okay, so that might be a good. Daryl said in Africa they run in packs, the small dogs. Now I know, of course, we live in the country, and at night, how many of you can hear coyotes howling? I'm telling you, I think our countryside is becoming overrun with them, but I can hear those things howling at night. That's disconcerting. But anyway, Samson goes out where there is obviously packs of and this doesn't say he did this by himself. I think he probably had to have some help, although it doesn't say that. Samson went and caught 300 jackals and took firebrands. I think a firebrand is like a slow-burning torch, and turned them tail to tail and put a firebrand in the midst of the two tails. Now, I'm sure Samson found this totally hilarious. He would be charged with animal cruelty today, though. Caught two of them, tied their tails together, and put a torch and turned them loose. Verse 5, and when he had set the brands on fire, he let them go into the standing corn of the Philistines and burn up both the shocks, see, what had already been harvested, and also the standing corn and the vineyards and the olives. What he does, he goes on, like a juvenile, he goes on an arson spree. And this totally wipes out all of the crops, and it sends the whole area into famine. It absolutely destroys the entire economy here. Verse 6, then the Philistines said, who has done this? And they answered, Samson, the son-in-law of the Timnite, because he had taken his wife and given her to his companion. And the Philistines came up and burnt her and her father with fire. Now, you see, what happened to her is the very thing she was trying to avoid back over in chapter 14. If you look at verse 15, when Samson had presented this riddle at his wedding feast, and the Philistines came to his wife and said, entice thy husband that we may declare unto us the riddle, lest we burn thee and thy father's house with fire. And that's when she nagged him into telling her what the answer to the riddle was. So she was trying to avoid, the very thing she was trying to avoid over there, you see, happens to her. So the Philistines burn her and her father and all their possessions. Verse 7, and Samson said unto them, though you have done this, yet will I be avenged of you, and after that I will cease. I'm going to get my revenge on you, but then I'm going to be nice. Revenge never has an end, does it? There's never an end to revenge. You may say, I'll get back at them, and then I'm done. That's not the way it works. Revenge never has a conclusion. And so he goes to these Philistines, and he smote them hip and thigh. That is, it's like man-to-man wrestling. And it also, that hip and thigh, that also is an expression that means there was a total slaughter. And with a great slaughter, and he went down, there that term is so characteristic of Samson. He went down and dwelt in the top of the rock Edom. In other words, he went down and dwelt in a cave like a fugitive. Now, while he's here, and we're going to stop there, but we'll pick up next time with verse 9. But now is when we're going to begin to see a glimmer of hope with Samson and some destruction that he does bring to the Philistines, which will weaken their nation for at least 20 years. So let's don't give up on Samson yet. If you look at your outline quickly, I've got about 1 minute here, and let's just review the outline. Starting at Roman numeral 1, well, up there in the paragraph, the word grace goes in amazing. Roman numeral 1, under Judges 14, Samson marries a Philistine woman contrary to God's law. And thus I've got a, no, that's a comma. I thought that was a period. And thus he enters into a covenant with the Philistines, the enemies of Israel, and the people whom God had called him to destroy. B, because of the riddle business, Samson went to Ashkelon, 25 miles from Timnath, to do his destruction. As a result of marriage to a woman of Timnath, Samson is now in covenant with the Philistines of Timnath, so he goes out of town to do his dirty work. Roman numeral 2, Judges 15. His father-in-law assumed that Samson had rejected his wife, or if you put daughter there, if you're referring back to the father-in-law, so he has betrothed her to another. The father-in-law is actually trying to extort another dowry or bride price. Can you recall, and of course we answered that, Jacob with Laban. Verse 3, because the covenant of marriage is broken, Samson feels free to take revenge. Verse 4, foxes literally refers to jackals. 5, he destroys the year's crops, sending the area into famine. And 6 through 8, after a great slaughter, Samson went down and dwelt in a cave like a fugitive. But soon Samson will deal a crippling blow to the Philistines, which will weaken their grip on Israel, finally giving Israel peace for 20 years. But at the end of that those 20 years pass, we don't know what happens in those intervening years. I find that very interesting, but evidently it was quiet, because Samson, in this next incident, he's going to kill 1,000 Philistines. But at the end of 20 years, we see Samson falling off the wagon again with a harlot. But yet, he's going to bring down the entire Philistine nation. And then we'll move over to Hebrews and see how that got him into the Faith Hall of Fame. All right. Thank you so much for being here this morning. And again, let me remind you, Mark will be sharing with us next Sunday. So, Mark, looking forward to it. Thank you for doing that. All right, don't forget the $1 a week partners. Let's always keep that in mind over here in the little box for Bob Stockland in Minnesota. Thank you for being here this morning, and I hope to see all of you here tonight for our presentation.